The full moon cast an eerie glow through the fog as we approached the looming gates of Woodrow Penitentiary. Vines and overgrowth blanketed the crumbling stone walls, evidence of the decades since this place was operational. I shivered against the autumn chill, gazing up at the imposing structure. Part of me wanted to turn back, to forget this foolish plan. But my boyfriend Anthony was obsessed with getting footage here for his documentary project. He insisted the place was a goldmine of paranormal activity. My friends Gwyneth and Stefani seemed convinced as well. Outvoted, I reluctantly followed them inside. The heavy front doors creaked open to darkness. Our flashlights revealed debris strewn about, remnants of the chaotic final days when Woodrow was shut down. Strange occult symbols marked the walls, evidence of intruders and vandals over the years. The deeper we journeyed through the maze of corridors, the heavier the atmosphere felt. Oppressive, like a weight pressing down. The darkness surrounding our small halo of light seemed alive, shifting and squirming just out of sight. Distorted shadows stretched down the rows of endless iron doors leading to the inmate cells. This place was like a tomb, lifeless, yet I couldn't shake the sense we were being watched. We decided to split up to cover more ground. Anthony descended to the lower levels with his camera while Gwyneth, Stefani, and I started on the top floor. The cells were in varying states of decay. Some still had rusted cots and toilets, the sparse furnishings of their condemned occupants. In one cell, Gwen found a hidden journal wedged behind a loose brick. It was penned by an inmate named Jonathan, documenting the supernatural occurrences and violent deaths plaguing Woodrow in its final days. He wrote about an entity summoned by a Native American prisoner, a demonic being called Afra who possessed inmates and drove them to gruesome murders. According to Jonathan's tales, Afra could be summoned by speaking its name. I shuddered reading his vivid descriptions of blood rituals and insane prisoners turning on each other as the demon inhabited their bodies. Gwyneth was fascinated, but I couldn't shake the creeping dread nibbling at the edge of my mind. That's when a blood-curdling scream rang out from below us. "Anthony!" I cried out, rushing for the stairs with Gwyneth and Stefani close behind. The echoing wails led us down into the bowels of the prison. The basement level was even more unsettling, with fewer windows letting in moonlight. Our flashlights revealed strange symbols, candles, and what looked disturbingly like bloodstains covering the floors and walls. Like some sort of occult ritual chamber. But no sign of Anthony. Where could he have gone? Stefani whispered. The unnatural silence settling around us made my skin crawl. That's when I heard it. A low inhuman growl reverberating through the corridors. We whirled trying to locate the source as the animalistic noises grew louder, closer. Heavy breathing, shuffling footsteps dragging through the dust. My blood turned to ice when I saw two glowing eyes emerge from the darkness. A hulking figure, too large to be human. It let out an otherworldly shriek that pierced my ears like a rusty blade. This was no escaped mental patient hiding out here, this was something far more sinister. "Run!" Gwyneth yelled, shoving me and Stefani toward the stairs. We bolted up the steps, the creature hot on our heels. It swiped at us with claws that sent sparks flying against the metal railing. I risked a glance back at our pursuer. In the flashes of our fleeing flashlights, I glimpsed flesh that looked rotted and desiccated, almost skeletal. Glowing red eyes floating in empty black sockets. My mind reeled, this was no ordinary monster. This was something unnatural, born of the occult forces that permeated this damned prison. We managed to lose the creature after racing through a maze of cell blocks. But any sense of relief evaporated when we reached the exit. The doors were chained shut from the outside. Some sadistic prank or supernatural force was keeping us trapped in here. "What the hell are we going to do?" Stefani said, yanking desperately at the chains. They wouldn't budge. "There has to be another way out. Come on." Gwyneth took off down an adjacent hallway. With no other options, I followed, dreading each step that took me deeper into this living nightmare. We stumbled upon what looked like the prison infirmary. A gurney lay tipped over on its side, surgical tools and bottles of unknown medicines scattered across the floor. Gwen rummaged through the debris, looking for anything useful while I kept watch. A brittle snap caused me to jump. Stefani cried out in pain. I whirled to see her clutching at a rusty bear trap now clamped around her ankle. Blood seeped through her fingers as she desperately tried to pry it open. That's when I noticed the tripwire she snagged. We had inadvertently sprung some sadistic trap set by whoever wanted us to rot away in this hellhole. Before I could react, a massive force bowled into me from the side. I slammed against the brick wall, my flashlight clattering away into darkness. Dazed, I could just make out the creature's silhouette stalking towards Stefani as she lay helpless on the floor, begging for her life. The beast let out a guttural snarl and reared back its claw to strike. Right as the deadly talons swiped down, they met only empty air. Gwen had pulled Stefani back, out of their reach. I scrambled over and together we pried open the trap's rusted jaws, now slippery with Stefani's blood. She couldn't walk on the mangled leg. Gwen fashioned a splint from debris as I scanned the surroundings for any sign of the creature. My heart pounded almost deafeningly loud in the silence. I knew it was still out there in the void, waiting to finish what it started. With Stefani's arms wrapped around our shoulders, Gwen and I managed to drag her through the maze of decaying prison hallways. We hid in one of the cells to catch our breath and assess the situation. According to Gwen's cell phone before it blinked out, there was no signal anywhere on the grounds. No way to call for help. And now we had a critically injured Stefani to care for. I dared to hope that boarded up in this cell, we would be safe till sunrise. Then we could figure out how to get the hell out of Dodge. That fragile glimmer of optimism shattered when I heard it, an all too familiar voice speaking my name. Harley. The rasp of vocal cords long and used. I peered closer through the darkness at the figure shuffling toward our cell. With trembling hands, I raised my flashlight, casting the beam over its decrepit features. Bile rose in my throat. It was Anthony's face staring back at me. But his skin hung unnaturally loose over his skull, his eyes were hollow voids. He looked undead. When he grinned, I glimpsed rows of jagged teeth too large and sharp for any human mouth. "Come join me, Harley." Not Anthony rasped. Gwen and Stefani screamed. This was no illusion or trick. Somehow the demon inhabiting Woodrow Prison had gotten to Anthony, possessed him, and was now coming for the rest of us. We cowered against the far wall as Not Anthony pried open the cell door with unnatural strength. His head rotated unnaturally further than any living cervical spine would allow. The skin of his face and neck tore from the motion, flaps hanging grotesquely as he leered at us. "Fresh meat," came the vile gurgle from his throat. He lunged, faster than I expected. His claw swiped the air inches from my face as I scrambled away. Gwen grabbed the splint keeping Stefani's leg in place and swung with all her might. The wooden beam cracked against Not Anthony's skull. He let out an inhuman shriek, pausing to run a hand over his now fractured head. Thick viscous fluid oozed from the wound. Gwen shoved me toward the open cell door. "Get Stefani out, I'll hold it off." She brandished her makeshift weapon, ready to bludgeon our monstrous assailant. Torn briefly between wanting to stay by Gwen's side and getting Stefani to safety, I realized I had no choice. As Not Anthony regained his senses and rounded on Gwen, I hooked my arms under Stefani and dragged her out of that cursed cell. With adrenaline fueling my muscles, I half carried, half dragged her through the maze of halls while her weakened cries for Gwen echoed behind us. Soon her voice faded, leaving only my ragged heaving breaths and pounding footsteps. A trail of blood smears marked our path. I didn't know or care where I was going anymore. I just knew I had to get away from that thing. When my body finally gave out, we collapsed in a heap on the cold floor. Every inch of me screamed for rest, but I had to keep going. Forcing my aching limbs to move, I searched desperately for some way out. That's when I spotted it, moonlight glinting through a high window. Salvation. Wheeling a rusted gurney under the window, I climbed up and smashed the remaining glass with my elbow. I sucked in my breath at the sight of the 20-foot drop to the ground below. But looking back once more at the blood trail leading like a beacon to our location, I knew a broken leg or two was better than what awaited back there. With my last ounce of strength, I lifted Stefani's semi-conscious body and angled her through the window. She tumbled into the underbrush below. Fighting the darkness creeping into my vision, I heaved myself up onto the window ledge. A guttural cry rang out from somewhere behind. The demon was onto us. I pushed off just as a clawed hand swiped for my ankles. The ground rushed up to meet me. Then only blackness. When I came to, the first rays of sunrise bathed my skin. Every part of my body exploded in white-hot agony. I didn't know if anything was broken, couldn't move to find out. All I could do was lay there in the dirt, staring up at freedom hovering so close from that window I'd managed to escape through. As the light pushed back the lingering gloom, I noticed Stefani nearby. She looked far too still. I wanted to call out to her, but only managed a weak croak. Had her injuries been too much? Shouts sounded from somewhere in the distance. Help had arrived. But they were too late for Anthony, for Gwenth. Salty tears mixed with the dirt and blood caking my face. The flashlight beams grew closer through the trees as they canvassed the grounds, searching for me, for any other survivors. As the EMTs carefully loaded my limp body onto a stretcher, I tried to warn them about the evil still lurking within those walls. But I'm not sure my garbled mumbling made any sense. In the end, it didn't matter. Once I was safely on board the ambulance, I watched through slitted eyelids as the police stormed the cell blocks and ritual chambers, finding nothing. Whatever demonic presence inhabited Woodrow Asylum seemed to have vanished. But as we drove away, I could have sworn I glimpsed a pale face watching from a third-story window. A visage that resembled Anthony, yet distorted. One final message: this wasn't over. Somehow, I knew this evil now lived inside me too. And that one day, it would come to collect. As I faded out again from sheer exhaustion, my last thoughts were of Gwenth. At least she had been spared this fate, escaping through merciful death. But I envied her. Because the real nightmare awaited me.